Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Zarya Rubin, a functional medicine doctor, an international speaker, and a burnout badass because I've been there myself. After walking away from my own high-stress medical career, I discovered how to break free from burnout to reclaim my passion, purpose, and joy. And now I'm here to help you do the same. From science-backed tips to time-saving hacks, and hopefully some aha moments that just might change your life. So sit back, relax, and let's do this. What if burnout isn't just about doing too much, but about the invisible patterns running behind the scenes in everything we do? My guest today, Anik Malenfant, spent 15 years building success in corporate finance until one morning she literally couldn't breathe. She walked away from the corporate finance world, and now she helps high achievers decode the subconscious patterns creating their upper limits. In this episode, we go beneath the burnout surface to the deeper programming that keeps smart, driven women exhausted, no matter how much they try to optimize. Anik is an inner work strategist, the founder of Ascension Academy, and the host of the Brave Shift podcast, ranked in the top 3% globally. Welcome to the Outsmart Burnout podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's such a delight. I always love connecting with you, so I can't wait to see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many directions that we can take, and I want to hear all about the work that you do and the unique sort of take on burnout that you have. But, we usually like to start at the beginning with folks and talk a bit about your origin story and how you went from being this super successful, running multi-million-dollar accounts and corporations to really crashing and burning when you were pretty young.
Yes. I guess I had like my midlife crisis early, so I got it out of the way.
Well, that's what I say. I say, well, we're overachievers in everything. So I overachieved in my midlife crisis and my burnout.
Yeah. And I know you would think the shade of greens that my mom went through when I told her that I was leaving finance to find a new path in holistic medicine and energy work and to just discover what else was out there in the world. She thought I had lost my mind completely. And, I had been by age 30 a branch manager of a multi-million-dollar firm. So that was not the direction that anyone that knew me thought I was going into. They thought I had had a psychotic break, but really it was an awakening, a realization that, there's got to be more to life than this. And that's the question I woke up with one morning, right? I couldn't breathe. And it was just I was working through that burnout. And for me, it looked very differently. It was just doing more. It's it was a burnout of dissatisfaction. There was nothing that was really savory about life anymore. And it didn't matter what rung I climbed or what check mark I clicked off of the must things to do in your life. I just had this sense that there was something deeply lacking in my life experience. And that's really where it started. And I think that's where we all start, is by we ask powerful questions like, there's got to be more to life than this. And what's fun is that the world opened up for me. Within a month or two, my life had completely changed in extraordinary ways that I could have never planned on purpose. So really, that's kind of the hot gist of it, is working successfully in finance and then waking up one day. And I think some people, it's a gradual running down. For me, it was kind of the moment I woke up, I was just I can't do this anymore. And I don't know that I want to. And then I started to really question, there's got to be more. And I could feel that in the depths of my soul. And I feel like that inner voice was what was calling me forward. And it's still that inner voice that I listen to every day and how I work with my clients. So that's why I call myself an inner work strategist, because I basically act as messenger between that inner voice between them and themselves to lead them forward in a more harmonious way of living. Because for me, I look at burnout as a symptom to disharmony with what brings you joy and
Mm,
balance and peace and everything else, right? So if you're burning out, that means you're not in sync with what you're here to do, how you're here to do it, who you are in the way that you identify with yourself. Like for me, burnout is a symptom to a disharmony with who you are in some way, shape, or form.
okay, well, I love that because I mean that's the tagline of my podcast. I mean, I say that burnout's not your destiny, it's a wake-up call.
Mhm.
That it really is sort of like this signal and it can whisper at you very subtly for a long period of time, like you said. But if you keep ignoring all of those messages and those signs, then it might start screaming at you in the form of, I actually feel like I'm literally and figuratively, suffocating, that I'm not living the life that I am supposed to live. And I think that you raised some really interesting points about achievement and checking all the boxes. And I think that we're taught from a very early age that if we do that, we'll be happy. Like
Mhm.
if we are successful, if we keep pursuing those goals relentlessly and we keep checking things off and we keep achieving and we keep getting accolades and awards and promotions and big salaries, that equals happiness. But it really
Exactly.
doesn't.
I mean, I don't know how they do it nowadays, but for me, I remember at in high school, you go to the guidance counselor and this is how they determine like what university or college are you going to apply to? What are you going to do next? And I was like, all right, what subject are you good at that you can do that you can make money? And so for me, that equation was very backwards because I was like, what makes you happy that you can do? That you can make money, right?
Yeah,
So
it's like that Japanese concept of ikigai, right? And it's like what you're good at,
yeah.
what you enjoy,
Mhm.
what can make money, and what can bring something to the world. And it's like at the intersection of those four things is your ikigai, or your sort of purpose. And I don't think that we often consider all four of those things in equal balance or even at all sometimes.
Exactly, because I think the equation back then for me, I was raised by 2 serial entrepreneurs, so it was like, when you make money and then you can relax, and then you can have access to happiness, and then you can have access to freedom, and then you can have but the money part came first instead of starting from a place of happiness, a place of freedom, a place of joy, and then creating prosperity from there. And that really came very apparent to me in the work that I've been doing for almost 15 years is this idea that we have to fight for peace, that we have to misery our way to happiness, that we have to grind our way to peace. Like it doesn't make sense. Like the math doesn't math. Like let's do something the opposite of what we want to create and use that energy and that strategy to get there.
Yeah,
It's
like
so
if you're like,
silly.
you
Yeah.
have to be miserable to be happy. I mean, I don't think that that doesn't really add up.
Yeah. Well, you can't like live miserable and then like one day the happiness pill shows up for you. That's
Mm,
not
mm,
how you achieve that destination of happiness is. And for anyone who's cross those boundaries, know that you're choosing that state of being on a daily basis until it becomes your state of neutrality. Whereas your baseline is happy, your baseline is grateful, your baseline is freedom. And then it just becomes how you breathe. It doesn't become something that you're chasing. It becomes something that you are and that you create in your life from that state of being.
Yeah, I love that. And that tracks with, what we know from the happiness research. That's something they talk about, which is the arrival fallacy. When we tie our happiness to external goalposts and like, well, I'll be happy once I, you know,
Mhm.
get into this school, or once I get this particular position, or once I get this promotion, or once I hit this certain salary, like then I'll be happy, then I'll be happy, then I'll be happy. And we're we just keep moving the goalposts also. And we keep waiting for that happiness to kind of arrive rather than creating it ourselves.
Exactly. I call that putting conditions on your creations. So you're like, I'm going to be happy when, and then we put a condition on top of ourselves. So it's like, I'll relax once this is done. I'll be able to breathe once this bill's paid. I'll be able to feel good about myself once I have this certification. I can tell you, and all of you that are listening, you know damn well that you're not going to relax more. You're going to have another something to do. You're not going to feel good about yourself. You're going to have the other rung that you're going to need to reach for. That destination, when you're chasing it like that, you're really pushing it away. Because what you're saying is that something outside of me gets to decide how I feel inside of me. So you've just given your whole power away. And that's why we feel so disempowered. And I think that's the epitome of burnout, is because we've got none of our own power left. We've just given so much and we haven't allowed ourselves to be the point of power in our lives.
Yeah. I think that's a really powerful statement, and it is a shift and a reframe for a lot of folks. A lot of us who were high achievers and sort of tied our worth and our happiness to that identity piece. And so you walk away from this big job and fancy, prestigious titles and etc. And your mother is freaking out, and I'm sure everyone around you is freaking out. So how did you handle that transition, and what did you do next?
What's really interesting is the idea that came to me was, well, why are the academics the only ones that are allowed to take a sabbatical? So I was like, you know what? I want a sabbatical, because I was like, I have no idea what I want to do next, but I know it's not this. And I had been offered another position that was different. And I had given them like my everything list. I was like, I want this kind of vacation. I want like all the freedom I could ask for with the paycheck. And when they offered it to me, I was like, you know what? Like, no amount of money and vacation time is really going to lure me back into this box that I just am not happy in. I felt like I had really just outgrown it. And I mean, I loved what I did. I love my clients. I love numbers. I love the analytics of it. Like, I still love that part. And I think that's why I'm so enthralled by the subconscious mind and the patterns, because for me it's about seeing all the dots and all the cycles and all the patterns show up, which we saw in the stock market. There's the ebb and flow, and we have different catalysts that happen. So really, what's I find so interesting is the work that I do today is not that different than the work that I did when I worked on the stock market, because energy drove everything in the market. And when we look at people, our energy drives everything that we create, whether that's a thought energy, an emotional energy, or physical energy, or even our resonance or our vibe that we put out and how we interact with other people. And so what I discovered was I have this natural gift to be a sommelier of that energy and be able to pinpoint on exactly where the disharmony lives and be able to map out the pattern so that my clients can really understand and see, okay, so this is the cycle that I've been living in, and this is what I need to break out of it. So I find that just super interesting when I work with people. So the shift wasn't intentional to, okay, I'm going to become this person who, interprets inner messages to discern self-defeating patterns for people. That wasn't the goal. It was more, Anik's going to spend some time healing herself and figuring out what she wants and listening to that other inner voice that she's been ignoring for decades. And that led me to this whole other realm of understanding the subconscious mind and people and our energy and how we interact and why we make the choices that we do and how the identities that we impose on ourselves hold us back and also set us free and all the things. It just opened this Pandora's box that I'm still savoring at, because there's always new research coming out on the human mind and how we work. So I mean, there's never a dull moment in doing this work. So it was really more of a happenstance, and it started with me choosing myself first and letting that journey lead me to figuring out what makes me happy and then do that and then make money. So I just essentially switched the formula, and which led me into doing this work for almost the last 15 years.
Okay, it's amazing. And I've never heard this term, but I love the concept of an energy sommelier. Okay, so we're gonna need to dive into that a little bit more,
Mhm.
because I think that, I'm a pretty scientific, I'm a physician, and a lot of my listeners are as well. And I think sometimes when we hear, energy, it seems very woo and
Mhm.
very like intangible and hard to really grasp the concepts. And
Yes.
so I would love to dive in a little bit more to some more tangible examples, or
Mhm.
you talk about, the invisible patterns that create visible ceilings.
Mhm.
And I love to get into that some more and just talk about how you're able to identify these energy signatures or patterns and what that might look like
Yeah.
and what that might lead to.
Well, I'll give you an example that I think you and most of our listeners will have had this experience in your life. And it's just a matter of practicing it. So we all get good at this once we start to pick up on cues. But have you ever walked into a room where someone like was fighting before you walked in, and you can feel the energy in the room,
Yeah.
right? Or did you?
It's like
Yeah,
hanging in
you're
the air.
like,
It's
"Ooh, it's
lingering. Yeah. The
heavy.
molecules are
It's
like,
heavy. Yeah, it's heavy. It's tense. It's dense. You can feel it when you come in. Your body is going, danger, 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 get out of here. Like you have a visceral response to the energy in that room and the energy that these two people are putting off, or how many other people are in the room, right? Another example is, have you ever walked in on two people, getting a little spicy with each other in a kind of a romantic way, and notice it's a different energy? There's almost like not a shame, but a we got caught kind of energy. And so what I notice is that when you just really sit with someone, I know like counselors and therapists, people who just sit and listen to other people, and you can be, and I've seen like educators do this, massage therapists do this, doctors do this, lawyers, accountants, when you just sit and you listen to people, not just with your ears, but with your whole being, you'll hear the words coming out of their mouth, and then you'll sense what they really mean. So you'll almost get like two stories, because what will often happen is people will tell you what they think you want to hear, what's the right answer, right? As a doctor, I'm sure, well, I'm not
yeah.
smoking as much as I used to, or whatever, right? Like that's better than it used to be, or I'm trying really hard. And then you've got this feeling of, yeah, I think your definition of that and my definition of that are very different, for example, right? And it's not about judgment or shame, but it's just about getting to the core truth of it so that you can actually get to help them. And I think that's where like the best portfolio managers, the best lawyers, the best accountants, the best estate planners that I worked with when I worked in finance were able to read between those lines. And so I've just translated that strategy and that skill set through intuitive development. And it's not, again, it's something that you practice because you can pick up on so many subtle cues that people will drop if you just like hold back and you listen and pay attention, not just with your ears, but with your whole sense. Because your body's always, your subconscious mind is always feeding you information about what's happening in the room, because that's its job. But when you get into a state of non-judgmental observer, where you're not judging what they're saying, you're not making a decision about anything, but you're just taking all the information in at the time, it paints this whole picture that allows you to see not just what they want to present you, because that's what we all do, but what the whole story is. And that's a little
Mm.
bit when I talk about emotional sommeliers, when I invoke an emotion in someone, when I ask a specific question, I can sense if that's shame or embarrassment or frustration or like the very subtleties. Each emotion has a little vibe that it puts out. And sometimes it's a little different from person to person. But over the years, I've been able to even help my clients identify. They're like, I have this feeling and it just feels heavy and I don't know what it is. And I was like, how would you feel if I said this? And they're like, yeah, that's exactly how it is. How did you know? Or I was like, it sounds like this kind of a subconscious belief. Like, who do I think I am to do this kind of thing? That's a super general one, but often, I can't tell you how many clients have told me, like, get out of my head. Like, you're freaking me out right now. And I was like, it's just, I can sense what it is that they're thinking or they're feeling because they're putting out a certain type of energy. So just in the same way, when you walk into the room, when you know they're either fighting or getting nasty, you can tell the difference. When you really practice that intuitive discernment and you observe that the energy in the space and the energy that people are putting off, you can create that discernment in what's happening in front of you.
Yeah, so that's fascinating, and it leads me to also think about Brené Brown, who I love, and she talks about all of in her book, like the map of human
The
emotions
Atlas
and
of the
things.
Heart.
Atlas of
Yeah,
the Heart, that's what the book is
I
called. Yes.
know. Yeah.
It's so fascinating. And
Mhm.
she talks about in the introduction something that really stuck with me because it was like she was in my head,
Yeah.
that when she was little, that she could predict the future. She would brag about this ability that she had. And she would always know what was going to happen or what was going to transpire in the room and what people were going to do. And that was because she got so good at picking up on not just the verbal, but the nonverbal cues and sort of the quote unquote energy. And that was born out of the fact that one of her parents was an alcoholic. And so
Yeah.
she had to become very astute at reading those cues and predicting what was going to happen, when this person was going to lose their temper, when they were going to blow up, when they were going to be dangerous, so she could protect herself and her siblings. So, without going too deep, do you think that that's a skill that you developed over time based on experiences?
I'll go as far as say, I know that that's a skill that we all have in ourselves. Some of us have developed it through being in dangerous situations. Some of it, like really good salesmen, have developed it through seeking opportunity. Like, we all have the secret sauce where we can really recognize behavioral pattern cycles, where we can pick up on energy when we know it's time to flee, or it's time to freeze, or it's time to fawn, or it's time to fight. Like, we have that embedded within us. Some people, and this is what I call intuitive development, is you have that, you've developed your intuition to discern between, is this where I fight, where I flee, where I fawn, or where I freeze, which is your trauma response.
Yep.
Or when we look at our intuition, because these are all instinct based, when you develop your intuition, you can actually rise beyond those four, which are fairly limited reactions to cognitive responses. And then you can actually address the situation in a completely different way that's not born from trauma or born from that reptilian instinct level, where you can actually address the situation from a completely different state of awareness. And I think that's where the secret sauce is. And that's where you go from just being able to pick up a vibe to actually using that skill to make choices and to take action and to respond to situations in the most highest way for yourself, rather than here's what's going to get me to the next moment. Because I was raised in an unsettled family environment, and I know exactly what Brené is talking about. And I knew exactly when to shut up, when to sit down, when to hide, when to show up, right? Like,
Same girl.
you learn these things for your protection, but we all have that survival mechanism. What I love is moving from surviving to thriving. Because when you're only moving from that trauma response, that's like gateway to burnout right there. Like that's because you're using that trauma response and you're just cycling through them. You're like, well, now I'm going to fawn, now I'm going
100%.
to freeze, now I'm going to, like, you're always in a trauma response and you never hit that neuroneutral, that baseline where you're just open and receptive. You're not like resting and digesting and you're not fighting or flighting, but you're actually in a state of complete openness. And so for me, I had a friend actually, I don't know if it's a term, but I think she coined it, or it might be something that she picked up somewhere, but she called it neuroneutral. And I was like, and I wanted to discover what that was. Cause like, yeah, we're like, oh, now I'm going to do self-care. So I'm going to rest and digest. And now I'm going to go back to work and fight or flight. Now I'm going to do, so we're bouncing between these two very active states of being. And she's got like a medical background as well. She wanted to be a surgeon, but moved into more of a holistic practice. And so she's like, what she discovered is the body actually has like this in-between space, which she called neutral. And I was just like, this is a really nice place because it's such a space of like deep peace on the neurological level, which I think is even more healing than the rest and digest because you're not in an active state. Anyways, I digress. We can
No,
talk about this all day.
this is gold. And I think this is exactly what folks need to hear. And it's something that I talk about a lot when I talk about burnout and I talk about, stress being your default operating system and really being stuck in survival mode. And how do you get unstuck and how do you get out of that? And how do you shift into more of that, neuroneutral state? I think I have heard that term too, that you're not in this constant state of activation and survival, which we become so accustomed to that it becomes our new normal, our default, and we don't really realize it until, we crash and burn
Mm-hmm.
and we
And I
have
think
to rebuild.
yes, I totally agree. And to echo that, I think when most people will notice it when they do burn out, then they stop, they feel all out of sorts because they're like, I need to be doing something, but they're like, I'm so burnt out, I can't do stuff. But I also feel like a junkie coming off of a high
Mm-hmm.
because I can't not stop, but I have to stop. And I
Yeah.
think that's that adaptation that we have on a cellular level. Because when we look at our physiology, we, by our very nature, adapt to our environment. And that includes the emotional states of being and the levels of stress that we're living, because we're just shooting all of those adrenal hormones into our bodies. And that becomes our high, our addiction. And then when we go to like a peaceful place for more than 2 weeks, I find like most people, like 2.5, 3 weeks is kind of like that's when they start getting the withdrawal shakes from not having the stress that they need. And you actually start to feel uncomfortable where you'll start finding things to stress out and feel overwhelmed about, which is really interesting. And I've caught myself in that pattern too.
Well, yeah, because you're trying to really recreate that sort of set point. And your
Exactly.
equilibrium. You're like, well, I feel out of balance because I'm not stressed, and stress has been my default for so long.
Yeah. And then you've
So
got like 2 trillion cells all screaming for their fix because they're like,
yeah,
they don't know they're not supposed to be stressed
they're
out.
like,
All they know is they have a set amount of cell
I'm in
receptors looking
cortisol
for adrenal. Yeah,
withdrawal.
like, where's
Yeah,
my fix? So you've got
yeah.
all those little cells screaming at you because they're like, something's wrong.
So how do we get folks out of that?
Well, one of the things that I love to use as an instrument is connecting directly with the subconscious mind. So the subconscious works at a different frequency at the conscious mind. So when we use affirmations, for example, and powerful, wonderful tools, the challenge with that is you're using them from your cognitive mind, right? So you're using it from the beta brainwave. So you're not connecting to the theta brainwave, which is the language that the subconscious uses, because that's how the programming gets written in. And so when we utilize the theta brainwave, so I've got a few different techniques that I use to support my clients in connecting to that part of their mind, some guided imagery. It's just about shifting your state of mind. So basically like a form of hypnotherapy, but not hypnotherapy, because each and every one of us has the capacity to access. Another tool that I love using is theta healing, which supports the mental state of being shifted from beta to alpha to theta. And we want to stay in that state of frequency with our mind, because that's where, when we plant seeds, they have the capacity to germinate. I mean, I can say I'm beautiful and I'm thin and I love myself until the cows come home. But unless I'm planting that seed in my subconscious mind so it can restructure all of my patterns, then I might as well be throwing seeds on the sidewalk, because it's not going to take, it's just going to take a lot of seeds, right? Whereas when you're planting seeds in fertile soil, which is your subconscious mind, then you give it a fighting chance. And then you want to create the environment to support that. So it's nice to say, well, I'm going to say nice things, but it's like, for me, because I live in the analytical as much as I live in the metaphysical, and I love bridging science and soul and strategy together, because I'm also a coach. And I'm like, okay, what are we going to do on a daily basis so that you can create an environment that's going to support this new pattern that you're instilling? Right? Because it takes 12 weeks to create a pattern and really anchor it into your life. So becoming a new person who lives in a new way is creating a new pattern, it's creating a new habit.
Wow. Okay. So as a former neurologist and an epilepsy specialist, you're
Ooh, yeah.
speaking my language about brainwaves. But for folks who are listening and might not have that scientific background, maybe you could go into a little bit more detail about what these different, alphabet soup of Greek letters mean and what it means for the brain in terms of brain activity, functionality, the different waves, the different wavelengths, and what that means for your different sort of conscious and subconscious states, and how we travel through, when we're stressed or when we're ideating or when we're relaxed and then when we're asleep, and how does that all track together, and how does that feed into this theta healing concept?
Yes, I love that. I love that we get to play with it. So I'll keep it complex but simple for everyone, so everyone can kind of meet us where we are. Because realistically, and I know you know this because you're like the neuro lady.
Yeah.
Each and every one of us cycle through these different states of mind, is what I would call them, every day. So you go to bed, you're in your beta brainwave, you're still awake, you're probably still scrolling your phone, and then you start to doze off and you go into your alpha and you start to think about different things, and then you doze off even more, and this is usually when the snoring starts. You start having that dreaming. So as soon as you're in your dream state, that's what we would consider, from my perspective. Yours might have a different threshold, if you will, to being in the theta brainwave, where you're having an actual dream and an emotional experience, because you're really tuning into that. And our subconscious speaks in feelings, sensations, images. It doesn't have like a well sorted vocabulary in the way that the conscious mind does, right? So even when we interpret dreams, it's like, well, how did you feel in that dream? It's like, I don't know, I was just running. Okay, well, what are you running from? Like, what are you running from? Or I was hiding, or I didn't have any pants on, or right? Like, where do you feel exposed in your life? That kind of thing. And then when you're really snoring and you've got drool coming out on your pillow, that's your delta, where you're like the most like unconscious state. So I think everyone's probably gone through that cycle or slept next to someone and been like, how are you not waking yourself up right now? Well, that's the delta. That's how I would explain it kind of in basic terms. So all we're doing is we're just training the mind to intentionally switch from beta to theta, beta to theta, beta to theta. And so we do this through meditative practices. And most of us can go into alpha fairly easily with, a 5 or 10 minute breath exercise or meditation exercise. And many of us can just as well easily go into theta by sustaining that type of imagery and intention when you're moving into that state of mind. Now, when I do this, because I also teach this modality, when we do this, day one, everyone's exhausted because the brain's like, I need to go into delta now, because it wants to cycle through its normal state. And when you snooze that amen, it's Mel Robbins shared, she's like, never snooze, because then you kickstart that cycle already, and you're going to be more drowsy than you've ever been. She's right. Don't snooze. 8 minutes is the worst amount of time for you to try to go back to sleep. but that's the same thing that
Guilty
happens,
as
right?
charged.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
same thing that happens. So everyone day one's like, they're like crashed out by the end of the class because we're forcing the brain to jump from beta to theta, beta to theta, beta to theta through practices. And then they're like, oh, and then once you have one or two sleep cycles and the brain is like, okay, I know how to do that, right? Because it picks up so easily. And that's when we start planting seeds of what I would like instead or what I would like to release. So kind of in the a cousin to hypnotherapy, but through a different portal, if you will, and a lot more consciously aware. So when I do my technique, like people can lay down if they want to, but it feels to them almost like we're having a really deep conversation about what's going on. And then they wake up the next day and they're like, is it normal that I feel like completely different? And I was like, yes. And then the following week, they're like, is it normal that the stuff that used to drive me crazy doesn't even bother me anymore? I'm like, yes, because that's the more you integrate that subconscious pattern, the more it starts to integrate naturally inside your life. And so things that would have normally set you off and triggered you, and we all know how to recognize our triggers, that thing will happen. And they're like, I was like really surprised because I didn't respond. Like it didn't, I was like, all right, whatever. And they just went on with their life. So it's really, really fun to see that in play. That's been for my experience. The funnest part is experimenting with it and be like, well, let's see what happens. Like all we did was talk, right, about stuff. And then you felt better. And so after 15 years, I'm like, well, there's got to be something to this. And so over the years, I've started to recognize different key patterns that people have. You might call them programs. But I see them as more like a full pattern because it's a pattern of thinking, it's a pattern of feeling, it's a pattern of acting, it's a pattern of reacting. It's also a pattern of how they label themselves and how they identify. So for me, it's like the whole cycle of what it is. And then it's almost like a constellation. What they'll show up with like 8 problems. And I'm like, here's how you only have like one problem. It's like this one pattern. And these are your symptoms, kind of like burnout.
Mm,
I'm like, burnout is one of the constellation stars, right? It's like, why are you burnt out?
mm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you talk about these subconscious patterns leading to these ceilings,
Mhm.
and talk to us about what that concept is like
Well,
for
if you've
folks.
decided, I think one of my favorite quotes is like Henry Ford, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, either way, you're
You're
right.
right.
And
Yes.
it's so simple, but it's so profound because it's true. If you subconsciously believe that, getting here is going to be really hard, or as soon as I reach this level, people are going to look at me different, or people are going to judge me, or people are going to, and everyone's going to say, I don't care what people think. You might not, but your subconscious sure as hell does, because it's still tuned into Neanderthal land, where if you got kicked out by your village, you were a dead guy, right? So like
Exactly.
that part of your brain still cares, right? So it's about creating subconscious perceived safety over, like it perceives it as being unsafe. And that's, for me, that's the Achilles heel of the subconscious. As long as the subconscious thinks something is unsafe, it will not let you do it. You will blow stuff up in front of yourself. Like, this is where we self-sabotage. We will say no to opportunities. We will talk ourselves out of things. We will invite problems into our lives with a golden invitation in order to stay where we are. And that's why what we would call the comfort zone, right? So the subconscious loves the comfort zone. It's familiar, it's a known, and it can plan on it. And it knows it can survive it because it has before. So this is like the sweet spot for the subconscious, but consciously, we all want more. More joy, more peace, more freedom, more fun, right? Like that's the human spirit. And it's very core is we desire. And so you can be at constant odds with the conscious and the subconscious. How I like to play with it with my clients is, how do we get the subconscious, which is like 95% of your brain capacity and your emotional state and your automatic responses and your energy, right? That makes you either completely passionate something or completely exhausted, right? Because it really generates all of your adrenals and your hormones and all the things, right? How do we get the subconscious invested in what the conscious mind wants? So that's the question that I always look at, because we are like, I got to fight my ego and I got to fight with my subconscious beliefs, and I got to fight with my self-sabotage. I'm like, no, fighting is not going to bring you to a state of peace. So it's like, but collaboration will, cooperation will, community, being in community with your inner critic, with that inner committee, right? We all have a peanut gallery living in our heads. And it's about creating unity and allowing all these different parts of us to realize, hey, we're playing for the same team, but some of the strategies that those old parts of you have, if you want to talk about it in different parts of us, different patterns that we created, those old strategies, what kept you safe before is keeping you stuck now. So when we talk about invisible ceilings, it's that pattern you developed at 7 when you were tiptoeing around the person who had too much to drink the night before. Now you're tiptoeing around the boardroom because you don't want to ruffle any feathers. You don't even realize it's the same pattern. It's just now it's adult, it's evolved, and it's got a shiny new name. Does that make sense?
Pattern, yes.
Yeah.
I'm just reiterating because it's so good. The pattern that kept you safe is the pattern that's keeping you stuck.
Yeah.
Love it. Oh my gosh. I could
You've
talk to
outgrown
you.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could talk to you all day about this stuff because I love geeking out about the brain and about the subconscious and the conscious. And we're going to move into the final section of the show, which I like to call the rapid fire round.
Ooh, I love a good rapid fire round.
Yeah. So I just ask you like a couple questions and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. We'll see how my subconscious answers. That's why that's why I also love a rapid fire round, because you're like, you don't have time to think about it.
Exactly. Okay. The most overrated recovery advice you've heard.
Relax.
Just relax. Exactly.
I've gotten that one and I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, how do you, when you don't know how, it's not useful advice. It's not that it's invalid. It's just, if I could relax, I would have done it by now.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like if you're telling someone who's having an anxiety response or panic attack, just calm down.
Just breathe.
Calm down. It's like, no, I would if I could. But yeah. What is something that high achievers protect that's actually hurting them?
Their identity.
Ooh, yes, girl.
Any label that you're going to put on top of yourself is going to limit you at some point. So I like less labels. Some people are going with more labels nowadays. I'm like, I want less. I mean, I don't even identify as an Anik. I'm like, I'm just a human with infinite potential.
I actually because, you get into these heated discussions online and I'm like, can we just remember that we're all humans and we're all stuck on this doomed planet and we should probably figure stuff out and just work together?
Mm-hmm. There's way more to life. Like living in joy is worth so much more than fighting about the details. Yeah.
Okay, what is your personal non-negotiable for staying aligned and true to your inner knowing?
For me, and this has been something that I've worked on a lot, it's the self-betrayal. So if I need to betray or compromise my personal values, that means what's being asked of me, I need to show up to it differently or it needs to change. But I can't betray those values because that's what got me messed up in the first place. And I would say when you betray your values and not just the pretty ones that sound good, but what you do when nobody's looking, what's really important to you when push comes to shove, your core values. If I need to compromise that in any way, I know I'm betraying myself. And for me, that's a non-starter.
What's a belief about success that you had at 30 that you've since released?
I'm going to have to bring us back to what you said earlier, because when you were sharing the once I have this, then I'll be happy I had my PhD in the once I have this, I'll be happy. Once I pass this, I'll be happy. Once this happens, once I get my first Audi, I'll be happy. Once I buy my house, I'll be happy. Once I'm a branch manager, I'll be happy. So I was the absolute queen of conditional creation.
I called that living my life on layaway. So that's what I used to do.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah. No more layaway living. I want it now.
Okay. What does rest actually look like for you?
Well, that's so interesting because it used to have a different image pre-discovering myself, is sometimes rest for me is actually working in the garden, going for a walk. I find nature is one of my biggest outlets for rest. And so it's actually more active. I'm an amateur beekeeper. So rest is actually sometimes going into the hive, even though it's an physical exerting practice, is you can't stress out around bees because they know. So just like I might be an energy sommelier, they're an endorphin sommelier. If you start to panic, they start to get spicy. So it's really interesting. For me, nature is my reset button.
I love that. So I had an amazing guest on a couple weeks ago, Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith, and she shared her framework, the 7 types of rest. And so we talked about the fact that rest isn't, there's physical rest, which is sleep, which has gotten really a lot of attention over the years, but there's so many other forms of rest that are more active rather than passive, and, emotional rest, spiritual rest, creative rest, social rest, etc. So it's like there's a lot of different aspects and dimensions and angles. So folks should check out that episode as well. But yeah, it's, this has been such an amazing conversation. And I always sort of close by saying, if someone's listening now, it's a woman who's like done everything on the checklist, done everything right. And she is starting to feel like her life is suffocating her. What do you want her to walk away from this episode, knowing or wanting to try, or what would be the next step for her?
Feel like the first thing the high achieving people, especially women, tend to default to is something's wrong, so I got to try something more. So I would invite them to consider doing less, which I know is going to freak out every cell in their body, and get really quiet and listen. What I've discovered is each and every one of us has this inner voice, like not the little devil on the shoulder, but because there's like, yeah, rest, watch a whole bunch of TV. That's just avoidance. Really, that's not rest. You're just avoiding the thing. You're not really resting. Listen to that subtle, calm inner voice that we all have within us, and allow that to guide you forward. And if you can't hear that voice, I actually have a 2-minute breakthrough quiz that they can complete, which will help them identify where I have a 4-pillar framework that I work to identify what pillar is the most out of sync. And if you explored that one, that would give you the best bang for your buck. So be quiet, listen to that nudge, the one that you've been ignoring. You know which one I'm talking about. Give it a chance to talk to you for like 5 minutes. And if that's too difficult, we'll start with the quiz. And then that'll help you hone down what area you need to focus on. And what's fun about that is when you look at one of the 4 pillars, you can actually start communicating with your inner, your inner wisdom, and going, okay, what part of my values are out of sync? Or where am I lacking discernment between what's really good for me versus what other people think I should do?
Well, you're speaking my language, because in my TED talk that I gave, the whole through line was about do one thing less, and as an approach to healing burnout and addressing burnout. So I'm with you, and I can't wait for folks to check out the quiz. So this is a perfect segue into letting everyone know where they can connect with you, how they can find you, how they could work with you, because I think that what you offer is really unique and really special and could definitely serve the women listening here today.
Well, thank you so much. I know we could go on because I want to just pick your brain with all the neuro stuff, because that's not my background at all. But I love
I guess
science.
I'll have to come on your podcast.
I know. I love all the science. So like for me, that's what makes it really fun, is when science is catching up to what we observe. And now we can actually nail it down to why that happens. So every day there's like new stuff coming out, which is super fun. So they can find me at ascensionacademy.life. And right there, you'll find a button of Find My Pattern is the button for the blueprint, or they can go to subscribe.io/breakthrough blueprint. And that's where they can find out what's the pillar that's out of sync that's causing a burnout for them in their lives.
Yeah, well, we'll put all of these links, of course, in the show notes. And if you have enjoyed this episode as much as I have, and I'm sure you have, please give us a like, a subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. That would be amazing. And share the podcast with someone that you know and love, a friend who could really use these messages. I can think of a couple that they need to listen to this episode. So when you do that, it really does help more people discover the podcast, and we would be so grateful. And of course, as always, remember, burnout is not your destiny. It's your wake-up call.